Alright, what's going on, guys? So we just got our first look at one of the new Nightfarers coming to Elden Ring Nightreign's DLC with the character trailer for Scholar, giving us a good overview of his abilities and a showcase of how to use the character. And there is a lot to break down here because this is a very interesting Nightfarer that fills a role that has honestly been missing from the character dynamics with the Nightfarers in the base game. So today I want to take a deep dive into literally everything we know about Scholar so far, what we can extrapolate from this trailer, and how he's going to be useful in a team dynamic as well as solo. There are also some interesting details we can see here with some new looks at some DLC content, and then we also have a lot of information about his lore that was not shown in the trailer, but that was hinted at, and we're going to break everything down. But as we get started today, as always, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring Nightreign, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. To start off today, let's go ahead and take a deep dive into this trailer. And first things first, we are of course focusing on the Nightfarer Scholar, one of two that will be coming in this DLC, and I'm sure we'll get the trailer for Undertaker in a few days. But what we currently know about Scholar, even before this trailer came out, is that he's a character with the primary weapon of thrusting swords, which he uses alongside a form of magic, which doesn't quite appear to be glintstone magic, but we'll talk about that more in the trailer. And the highest stat that he'll be boasting is Arcane, likely having an S alongside Executor, but using that stat for an entirely different purpose. Now, thrusting swords are an interesting choice for the primary weapon of this character, but it does play really well into his abilities, which we'll talk about more in a second, for one very specific reason. Let's take for example that highest Arcane stat with a weapon like the Ant Spur Rapier, which inflicts Scarlet Rot. There was a really good strategy with Executor that with that high stat, you can inflict that Scarlet Rot at a much higher rate than you can with other characters. But now with a character like Scholar, and the primary weapon being thrusting swords, it's going to be much more effective with that unique moveset and his skill to transfer damage and likely debuffs between enemies, and we'll come back to that. But we can see a bit of this unique moveset here, where he has a very flowing step that seems to chain into a sort of backstep. Now I can't really tell if that was a dodge there or a direct backstep, or if that's part of the weapon chain, but you can also see him do the feint that thrusting swords have, with a bit of a swipe while he backsteps, and a double slash as he moves back in. Now the next shot in the trailer has him scouring a map at one of the towers, and then knelt over a bush seeming to collect something. Now let's take that clip and then read the blurb that we got about this character from the PlayStation blog whenever the trailer dropped initially. It said, "Scholar, an academic who walks the lands between. Boasting impressive arcane levels, he gains incredible advantages through battlefield observation." Now reading that in context of these clips, it makes me think there's going to be some kind of gameplay advantage with Scholar for you to go through these landmarks. So for example, using things like maps or trees and bushes around the map may give him some kind of gameplay buff, and that could potentially be his passive ability, which we don't know of yet. Say for example, for every map you collect, or like the relic we already have, every rise you solve, it gives him a small stat boost for the rest of the game. Now that is not confirmed, that is pure speculation on my part, but that's just what it sounds like to me when I read that. And like I said, since we already have relic effects that do that, I think that would be a very interesting passive ability that makes you play around his character style. But again, that's just my own speculation. What do you guys think that means? Now the next bit, we see Scholar and Duchess fighting side by side in a banished knight castle, and now we get to see Scholar's skill in action. You can see it makes a focus on your camera, and enemies within that view seem to get a debuff. Now what exactly is this debuff? Well, let's take a look. Whenever he casts it, you can see a sort of circle filling with a red meter, and whenever the debuff is applied, they're weighed down by this red and black effect. Now I don't know for sure, but it looks like to me that the enemies are now slowed down. It could be an editing effect, but you can notice that their swings are significantly slower, while the lightning pot is still moving at normal speed. That's just what it looks like to me. They could also take more damage during this time, more stagger damage. We don't know exactly for sure. But if it is a skill that slows down enemies that he can see within that view, that would be incredibly powerful. But then the trailer moves on to a fight with Everdark Libra, and Scholar casting his ultimate art, Joint Chain. This ultimate binds enemies together within a certain diameter, causing damage to transfer to all of the enemies, which we can actually get a better view of in the DLC trailer, where you can see him cast the ultimate and then hit one of the Mesmer soldiers, causing the other one that he did not hit to react in kind. So this is going to be really useful for clearing out areas of enemies, which is why of course they showcase the Everdark Libra fight here. And honestly, it's nice to have at least one hard counter to this fight, because even after the nerf, I still think this is the hardest fight in the game. So that is going to be a very useful ability, but the question that a lot of people have is what is the use case going to be in single boss fights? Does it just do nothing in a fight against one boss at a time? I don't think so. And that's because when he casts Joint Chain, you can notice that a ring is applied to allies as well. They don't show us exactly what that does, but we can speculate a bit. And of course, immediately I think, well, for enemies that probably applies negative effects jointly, but for allies, it likely applies positive effects between characters. So things like healing or buffs. Again, we already have relics that do this, so it could very easily be applied to a character ultimate, which we talked about as well with weapons in the last video. Now this could also just be a straight debuff to enemies and buff to allies, in addition to those effects, and if that is the case, that's going to be incredibly useful, and make a use in solo play. Because say for example you're playing solo as Scholar, fighting a boss like Caligo. In that situation where you have no allies, and there aren't multiple enemies, does your ultimate just do nothing? I don't think so. And that's why I'm inclined to believe that there's a straight buff and debuff applied to enemies and allies respectively. And also that Scholar's name in the game files is Buffer, so I think that carries some weight as well. But that is where the trailer ends. From a gameplay perspective, I think this is going to be an incredibly useful character, especially in trios. And if he does apply buffs and debuffs with the ultimate, then it doesn't matter what scenario you're in, it's going to be useful. Now one thing we did not see from Scholar in this trailer was him use any magic, but since that was hinted at in his description, I would not be surprised if he does have some sort of base intelligence where he can use certain staffs or magic. But what do you think of Scholar's abilities so far? Do you think he has a lot of character utility? Do you agree with the speculation I proposed? And does this look like your new main? Y'all let me know down in the comment section below. The other information we have about this character comes from the data mine, where much of his dialogue from his Remembrance quest was found in the game files. Now for obvious reasons I cannot play you that dialogue, but I'll describe to you a bit what we learn. He mentions that he's from a different race of people, attempting to find the home of his forebears. Now, I'm inclined to believe that this home of his forebears, which he does find eventually in the Remembrance quest, is the new Great Hollow Shifting Earth, because that's kind of the same description they gave to this, describing the Great Hollow as full of divine towers and remnants of an ancient people. And also it just makes sense from a gameplay perspective. We have that same step in several other Remembrance quests. Another characteristic of him that will play out is that he'll make the characters tea, which is likely hinted at in this clip in the trailer, where he's knelt over the bush, collecting leaves perhaps. That might also be a Remembrance quest step. But the other aspect of him is that he has a deep hatred for the Dreglord, and appears to know more about it than the other characters. And that leads me to believe that the Dreglord was likely the reason for his people's collapse, and he is on a quest for vengeance. But those are the main specifics we could glean from a lore perspective. Definitely a super cool character, very interesting story, and I'm really curious to see how well he's going to play in a team format. But y'all let me know what you think about Scholar down below. Is he going to be your new main? Or does this look like a character you're going to pass on? Either way though, if you enjoyed today's breakdown, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new around here, and I will catch you in the next one.